Well, Yvonne, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's unfortunate that this has led to the escalations that we see now. Unfortunately, I think for those observers who have been witnessing the previous activities in recent weeks, uh, deduced and foresaw something like this happening. Something was simmering. This is a culmination, a result of uh, policies of occupation. This was a result of uprooting um, people from their homes and substituting them with other settlers. At the same time, this lent itself very well to extremists on the Palestinian side that had to then perpetuate this conflict. So now it 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 lent itself. Now we've entered into a cycle of violence that is going to be very difficult to stop. And that's the real tragedy of it. This cycle will see more casualties on both sides, with Palestinians disproportionately are the ones that are being the victims.
Well, tell us a bit more about your thoughts on how this conflict has ended up in the hands of extremists instead of the people now, and what effect it has had on the frequency of attacks and number of casualties.
Well, whoever's been observing what's taken place in Israel can see and will realize the rise of the far right and the increase of right-wing rhetoric that has been racist towards Arabs. Now, of course, there's racism everywhere, but this emboldenment, this emboldenment and by political parties in Israel, kind of emboldened and influenced the people in some of the people in Israel to take these policies further and to think it's okay to say death to the Arabs. They think it's okay to call for more violence. Now, unfortunately, violence begets violence. And this is something that's a result also of a political situation taking place in Israel. The competition over the right-wing voices led to this. This is what this emboldenment. This is what this emboldenment is a result of. The competition and trying to curtail and own the right-wing factions in Israel by Netanyahu and others.
And as you say, Aziz, civilians are the ones to suffer the most from all this fighting. What can they do to increase their chances of surviving during this terrifying ordeal?
It's unfortunate, Yvonne, because I don't think there's much they could do. I think especially in Gaza, they have been besieged, but there's nowhere else for them to go. They are they're not boycotted. What's the word again? I forgot. But they are basically under attack, and they are in a very heavily dense area, and I think it's just unfortunate that they don't have much in their hands. This is the tragedy of the matter and the reality of the matter. The people that have issues in their hands or have something in their hands are the politicians and in Israel, and they need to show restraint. They need to show a willingness to de-escalate the situation. Furthermore, I think the United States is perhaps, or not perhaps, is the only actor that could influence this situation further. And so we need to start seeing more influence from the United States upon both actors to reduce tensions and save innocent people.
So you believe the only power that can change everything is the US. Tell us a bit more about how so. What needs to happen?
Well, yes, in some, it is the only actor that could really influence and use its leverage against, or not against, use its leverage to solve the situation. We have to contextualize this a bit more. the Biden administration is a bit more of a traditional administration, and not an administration that is like the Trump administration, which Israel experienced a tremendous benefit, and that the Trump administration was a blind supporter of Israel, and that's something that Netanyahu really appreciated, obviously. Now we've entered into a new era of American-Israeli relations, which is now complicating the issue a bit more. The United States is trying to maintain this balance of its clear support for Israel, its traditional support for Israel, but it's also its support for the two-state solution and support for more Palestinian people. So we need to start, we hope we could see more of leverage from the United States. But that being said, I don't think anybody needs I don't need to remind everybody of the Israeli influence that they have in Washington, D.C., that even complicates the situation further. Hence why the United States always has to have a pro-Israeli stance first, and then everything else later. The Biden administration is trying to manage that. That's what makes it complex.
A complex situation indeed. Aziz Alghashian, thanks so much for joining The World. We really appreciate talking to you.
My pleasure, Yvonne. Thank you for having me.